All right, we begin with oil and gas here in Nigeria. You saw the big news with the statements that were put out. The Nigerian Agip Oil Company successfully has been acquired by Oando PLC. Total value $783 million from that's been put forward for the company. Now, with the completion of the acquisition, company said in a press statement that it is a major step forward for Oando's long-range plan as far as the return of asset and compensation for it, both included in the transaction. Oando's position in Nigeria's oil and gas industry is anticipated to be strengthened by the acquisition, which would also increase its operational footprint and upstream competency. I think we've got a quote from Wale Tinubu, who talked about this particular acquisition and what it means for the future. Yeah, there it is there, the Group Chief Executive Officer of Oando. It says, "This is a win for Oando and every indigenous energy player as we take our destiny in our hands and play a pivotal role in the next phase of Nigeria's upstream evolution." Let's talk about that upstream evolution. We're happy to have Mustapha Alao, Head of Research at Investment One. Mustapha, good morning to you. Good to see you again. Of course, I know that your background, of course, is in oil and gas. You've studied that for a long time as an analyst. And so, as you know, as the head of Investment One Research now, how do you see what Oando is going to be getting from this deal? What's your takeaway?
So, you know, it's a JV that has been existing. So if we look back in history, Oando, 10 years ago, they entered this JV. This was in 2014 with NAOC, that's Nigerian Agip Oil Company, as well as the NNPC, whereby the NNPC, they own 60%, and then Cornell and Agip, they own 20% each. You know, so this was, you know, an acquisition that they did from ConocoPhillips Nigerian portfolio at that time. So with this acquisition now, right, with this deal, $783 million US, right, we should see that Oando's stake in that, you know, incorporated JV should go up to 40%, right? So, you know, in terms of what they're getting, you know, of course, you know, all the assets that come with it, as well as, you know, the infrastructure. So the reserves, for example, 2022 estimates, so that Oando has about 505 million barrels of oil estimates. With this deal now, you know, they're going to be getting an addition of 493.6 million barrels of oil. So that should take that total reserves up to about 1 billion, right? And of course, you know, with regards to all of the other assets, you know, you're talking about, you know, about 3 gas plants, gas processing plants. You're talking about, you know, there's the Kwale Okpai power plants, phase 1 and phase 2, which has a total nameplate capacity of about 960 megawatts, you know, and, you know, about 1,490 kilometers of pipeline. So, you know, they're getting all of that, you know, and what we're expecting is that this should help to, help to boost Nigeria's production outputs, you know, the production, national output, excuse me. So, Oando, they also talked about how this should also help, you know, with their cash generation. You know, Wale Tinubu talked about how cash generation should be immediate. So, I mean, what to expect is that this should help them in terms of their liquidity position. Why do I say that? Because if you look at our 2023 unaudited financial statements, you see that the current, current ratios, you know, they're not looking, you know, very good really. So if you look at their current ratio, which essentially measures how much their current assets can cover their current liabilities, is about 0.49, right?
That has to be higher.
Yeah, you know, so, I mean, and if you look at a stricter metric, right, so whereby you're checking just their cash and cash equivalents, that's 0.02. So, yeah, you know, so we expect that this should help to, you know, be beneficial for them, yeah.
Now, they've cautioned that there are some risks with this transaction because, you know, there's a lot of excitement, but they say, hey, listen, you know, there's some risks out here. Can you speak to some of those risks in terms of what lies ahead?
Yeah, I mean, well, in oil and gas investments, you know, there are risks. One that comes to the forefront of my mind now is, you know, of course, you know, the reason why a lot of the IOCs, the international oil companies, are divesting from their onshore assets, right? So, I mean, you have insecurity, oil theft, you know, pipeline vandalism, you know, and a lot of these divestments, you know, is going from onshore. You know, a lot of them are just retreating, going offshore. And if you look at the assets that are involved in this JV, which, you know, Oando is going to you know, have a higher stake in now, which is about 40%. You know, it's OML 60, OML 61, OML 62, and OML 63. OML 61, right, is onshore. You know, it's just about south of OML 60. OML 62 is mostly onshore. You know, the part of it is offshore, about 8 kilometers offshore. and almost 63, is onshore. So, that's a key risk, dealing with the host community, because there's that debate whether the DOCs, that the domestic oil companies, can deal better with, the host communities and all of that, better than the IOCs. And of course, there's also the risk of, commodity price fluctuations. And of course, there's also the risk of, in terms of the assets themselves that, they're acquiring from Agip. An instance that comes to my mind now is when ITO, when they did an acquisition of assets from Shell back in 2015.
That's right.
And there was this oil spill that happened in 2021 that lasted for about 38 days.
We covered it. Our Rise News
they
covered it extensively.
They talked about how they didn't have the expertise or strategic plan for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
They even took them to court, demanding about 4 billion USD. For that, and talking about how they inherited pipelines that were not strong in terms of their integrity. So these are some of the risks that could come about with this kind of transaction.
Mustapha, this is why I love having you on the show, because you break these things down so well. Okay, let's talk about the stock now. The stock price, I think we have the numbers, has been just on a tear. As far as it closed up 10% yesterday. It was one of the highest gainers yesterday. 1 month return, 124%, 3 months, 276, year to date so far, 264. However, there have been some folks who have cautioned about whether or not to go short term or long term on the stock. What's your view on the stock performance and whether or not one should get in there? How do you marry those two together?
Well, I mean, I don't want to give outright financial advice
of course.
on this platform right here. But
consult your financial advisor before making any decision.
Exactly. But I would say that I think they've even done better than that 240, 260%. I think that now they're over 300% year-to-date performance, right? But what I would say is that the stock is quite volatile, right? If you look at the performance of the stock, just over the last 3 months, that's since May, we're in August now, isn't it?
Yeah.
They've done over 380%.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And as of May, right, they were down about 14%.
Right.
Right.
So
now,
in swing.
In August so far, right, over the last 10 days, right, when 23rd August today, over the last 10 days, they've appeared on the list of top gainers or top losers every single trading day over the last 10 days, right? So, I mean, you want to take that into consideration, when you are making your investment decisions around Oando. And also, I would say as well, if you look at the industry average PE ratio, right, it's about 0.1.
Price to earnings for our viewers.
So you're comparing the price to the earnings per share. It's about 0.1x. However, Oando is about 6.7. Right, 6.7. So what that
way over the average,
overvalued, overpriced. So you want to take that into consideration. So I would say definitely this news about the acquisition has definitely been a factor that has tilted investor sentiment towards it, causing the rally. But take that into consideration.
Great stuff. Look, there's been so much oil and gas news this week, last week. You've of course seen the back and forth in NNPC, Dangote Refinery, NNPC's 2023 financials. We did a deep dive, went into all the things. I wanted to get I've been talking to, of course, we've been talking about this, but share your views as far as what you thought about how NNPC performed in fiscal year 2023.
Well, I mean, if you look at, so earlier this week, I was in another interview, right? And they asked me what I was expecting, what was I looking forward to seeing in the results, and this was when they announced, when they did a preliminary announcement of
the press
conference of their top line and their bottom line, and they even did like a little animation showing the horse climbing. So I mean, first of all, if you look at that revenue, they did about 172% growth in revenue year on year, right? However, if you look at it in dollar terms, right? If you take into consideration the fact that the Naira over that same period, that between 2022 and 2023, depreciated by about 122%, right? So you take that off the 172%, so you're seeing about 50%. I mean, NNPC, is dealing in commodities that are being sold in USD. So it would be nice to see that translation, currency, as well as the currency in which
Setlat reports their earnings in dollars.
Yeah, they report it in dollars as well, So that would be nice to see. But then again, aside from that, when you look at it in context. So, okay, we're doing this in terms of revenue. Is this what we should be doing based on the assets that we have?
Right.
I think that's a key question to ask. So, one of the metrics you can use to tell this is asset turnover, for example, right? So if you look at the asset turnover of NNPC, right, based on the 2023 results that it released, it was 9.72%. Now, by comparison, let's look at Petrobras, for example, in Brazil. Right, there was about 47% asset turnover.
Yeah.
Let's look at Saudi Aramco. Saudi Aramco was about 75% in terms of asset turnover. So we need to be doing more, right, in terms of sweating our assets, right? So we need to start having, conversations. A lot of these assets that are sitting on our balance sheet, how much are they generating for us? Do we need to sell off some? Are they being a burden? I mean, look at our liabilities. That's even a whole another story.
Like the refineries.
Right.
Well, those are assets. Sorry, those are actually assets. Sorry, I'm counting them as
refineries. But I mean, if you look at the liabilities, I mean, looking at forwards, 5 trillion.
The forward sales for using oil
forwards, so serious conversations need to be had on the corporate finance level.
Yeah.
I mean, is that going to be refinanced? Get a credit rating, go into the capital markets. So, yeah, I mean, these are definitely the points that we need to look at. How much are we sweating our assets? Should we be doing what we're doing in our P&L based on what we have in our balance sheet? Right,
excellent. The IPO, that's something I keep bringing it up with almost every guest. And we've had, I think you're the third guest in a row, 2 of them on the morning show. Does it need to happen as far as what it means for corporate governance? And should we get a dual listing like a SEPLAT? Where we can have the NNPC on the NGX and another exchange overseas. What's your view on this IPO that people want to see?
Well, I mean, people do dual listings when they want to raise more money.
Right.
Typically, so you want to raise more money, you go into another market, another jurisdiction, you raise more money there. But what I would say is that should NNPC look at the IPO? I would say that looking at NNPC's statement of financial position, their balance sheets. There isn't an adequate component of equity in there, right? So, I mean, looking at comparisons again, when you look at the percentage of NNPCL's equity to their total assets, is about 11%, between 11 and 12%, less than 12% definitely, right? Then if you look at Petrobras again, for example, it's about 36%, 37%. If you look at Saudi Aramco, it's about 62%. Right, so we really need to up that, right? And I think it starts with doing some base work first, in terms of look at the PIA, look at Section 65, for example, in terms of incorporated JVs. All the 60%, 55% that we're having, or that NNPCL is having in these JVs, probably restructure that. That is after you've done the things I mentioned prior. That is getting your getting into the capital markets, refinancing, getting your credit rating, and we're able to raise the money. If you see 40 billion USD now from the equities markets, right? You can take a good chunk of that and use it to do a lot of things. So I would say that we definitely need to do that. Looking to going public. Right, so NNPCL, we should see NNPC PLC. Right,
fantastic stuff. Mustapha Alao, look, as I said, always a pleasure having you on the show to talk oil and gas. Head of Research at Investment One, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time.